So 6 months ago, the U.S. military carried out a daring operation to capture Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro. Then we all just sort of moved on. Now, a tragic earthquake has brought Venezuela back into the news, but so many questions remain. Like, for one, has much really changed at all? So to help unpack the current situation, we're joined today by Ambassador Jimmy Story. Story served as the ambassador to Venezuela from 2018 to 2023 and remains very closely tied in with what's happening in the country and their relationship with the United States. We get into the devastating effects of the recent earthquake, what's different after this change of power, and more. Now, you can keep up with Ambassador Story and his firm Global Frontier Advisors at the links in the description below. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time. We had set this up or started to get this in the works a few weeks ago, and the whole plan, and we'll get into this today, is talking about what does Venezuela look like today, kind of post-Maduro. Of course, since then, there's been a major earthquake in Venezuela, so I was hoping maybe you could talk us through what's happening right now in relation to that disaster.
Right. Well, I think these two things actually dovetail, and they come together, because with the removal of Maduro on January 3rd, what happened was the same exact people are still in charge of this regime. In the humanitarian crisis that I witnessed firsthand on the ground and that the United Nations pointed out or still points out is happening on the ground in Venezuela, that didn't stop with Maduro's departure. And now you have twin earthquakes, 7.2, 7.5. So far, official figures are 2,000 dead. That number is well above 10,000. It could approach 50,000. And what the earthquakes are underscoring is that for 26 years of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro government, the state has been hollowed out. They don't have an ability to react to this a terrible tragedy in a way that helps people. The medical system in the country is completely gutted. And that's what happens when you have a kleptocracy in charge for so long that mismanages a country. And our focus should be on search and rescue and saving the people in Venezuela. It's such a tragic thing. And I know people who lost loved ones directly affected. That's where my focus is. But you can't help but also draw the conclusion that 25, 26 years of mismanagement has led to the state's inability to really react effectively.
I've seen a couple graphics shared of the countries that have sent people or resources at this point, and that's always awesome. And I believe the United States has sent a significant number down. Great. Love to see that, at least.
No, I think, look, the United States has made an initial offer of $300 million. I think that's fantastic. I would like to see the Comfort, the hospital ship. It's the 7th largest hospital once it's operational. It's 1,000 beds. I mean, if you can imagine. I mean, I've been on this thing many times. We send it routinely to the region to help people in Colombia or other countries. We should send that immediately to Venezuela to help. We had the Fort Lauderdale off the coast. We fixed the main airport. We took over La Carlota. We are absolutely helping. The initial response has been great. Is really, you have to give credit here. However, the long-term fixing of the infrastructure of state that has been hollowed out is going to require significant resources over a period of time, and frankly, require us to have the kinds of tools in our toolkit that we no longer have. USAID being one of them. Right? The military is fantastic. I've worked closely with the military. I served in Afghanistan. I ran counter-narcotics in Colombia. I know General Donovan at Southcom. I've worked closely with these guys for a long period of time. And they'll be the first ones to tell you they're not equipped to nation build. They are equipped in this extremist situations to get in and lend a hand. But we shouldn't be leaning on the military to be all things to all people at all times, but rather have other parts of the government that can have a reaction. So initial response, like they've done a great job, General Donovan and company, great job initially. Long term now, how are we going to be positioned to help Venezuela get back on its feet?
How are we? Brings us to the big question. The beginning of the year, this crazy operation that incredibly successful by just about every metric, right?
Right.
And we grabbed Maduro, brought him back. I think he's in New York at this point, waiting trial. And it seems like the Venezuela threat went from, imminent to nothing, and it's just fallen off the radar. So can you kind of bring us up to speed? What is happening in Venezuela now that Maduro is gone?
Well, I mean, this is the same dictatorship under new management. So let me be clear. When I was down in March of 2022, I arrived in Venezuela in 2018. I should back up. In July of 2018, and in January of 2019, when we recognized Juan Guaido as a legitimate constitutional president of the country, they kicked us out. I stayed because we didn't recognize Maduro as the president. So I stayed behind. We had the families out. I stayed with the Marines, diplomatic security, and a couple of other people for an additional 2 months under really weird circumstances, and then opened up shop in Colombia. And I went back only in March of 22 to negotiate the release of American hostages. And I did that negotiation with Delcy Rodriguez and her brother Jorge Rodriguez, which kind of tells you that these people they've been regime insiders since Maduro has been president, and even before.
And Delcy, to be clear, is the one now in charge, right?
Right. Delcy Rodriguez is the acting president. But we had sanctions on these people. We had rewards for justice on some of these people. I love to point out the Minister of Defense, Vladimir Pagino Lopez. He was a Minister of Defense for a very long time, and he is sanctioned. He's on an SDN list. He has a reward for justice for his capture. He's no longer the Minister of Defense, which sounds like a good thing, but he's just the Minister of Agriculture. Who knew he was a clandestine cultivator this entire time, right? So they just shop their people around. So imagine a mafia organization in which the leadership's been plucked out. Tony Soprano's gone in Carm, or whatever her name was, right? If you remember the show. And now you have the rest of the players just taking over the same positions. So things haven't really fundamentally shifted, other than the fact that we have complete access to everything in the country, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And coming back to the earthquake question, are we now, the question I posed for you, Preston, are we now not responsible, if we're in charge of Venezuela, for the results of the response to the earthquake? And I think that's something that we're going to be unpacking over a period of weeks.
Yeah, we're just supposed to get the good stuff here. We just get the oil. We don't want to deal with any of the problems. You start throwing natural disasters our way, that's not us. But
that's a great question. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was going to say, look, in the month of April alone, we sold $3.7 billion worth of Venezuelan crude. So let's assume it's a similar amount in May and a similar amount in June. Where's the transparency on that money? Now, we've offered $300 million. Does that mean the $3.4 billion that's in the bank account from April alone? How is that money being utilized? And I think that's a fair question. It's a question that was posed to Secretary Rubio at Congress, and I don't think he gave an adequate response. I think we need to really figure out how the proceeds are actually being operationalized to help the people of Venezuela. So far, I don't see it.
Can you explain that a little bit further? So is that Venezuela sold it to us and then we resold?
No, we took the oil and sold it basically on behalf of Venezuela and kept the proceeds. We told the companies, you're allowed to take this oil out of Venezuela. They had about over 30 million barrels in storage. So Trafigura and another company, I can't recall the name of offhand, were like, okay, you have the contracts to take this oil from Venezuela and go sell it. The proceeds of that oil come back to a bank account in the United States. I mean, you have a skeptical look on your face, Preston, because it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. It's out of the realm of that which is normal. We took the resources of a country and sold and made sure that those resources were sold at world prices, and we held on to the money that was generated from it.
Yeah, I don't mean to be skeptical. I had in my mind that we were opening up a market, maybe is the way to put it. We're like, with a more friendly government, we would open up trade and it would open up access that hadn't been there before. I guess it hadn't registered. Like that is, we can't do that. I mean, we can't just take it.
It's wild, okay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a 19th century gunboat diplomacy type approach to foreign affairs, which is completely different. And then, so we're doing that, and then let me layer something on that I think for your viewership or readership or listenership, whatever you call it.
All three.
might find all the above. Might find interesting. I recently wrote a piece for MS Now. It talks about the drone wars come to the Americas. If you recall, when we first used drones to take out the heads of foreign terrorist organizations, it was a fraught process. It kind of started in 2002, but the president had go authority, and it became something that slowly slid down a slope towards commanders in the field making decisions on when to hit particular targets with drones. For the first time ever, we did it in the Western Hemisphere. We did it in Venezuela, and we took out the head of Tren de Aragua. His name is El Niño Guerrero, right? And I am interested to see how this policy will develop over time. When I was in Brazil last month, and a lot of my contacts and friends there asked me, "Oh, you just designated two groups in Brazil as terrorist organizations. Are you going to start shooting drones inside of Brazil?" Well, why not? Is the answer, because I wouldn't do it. Don't let me misrepresent myself. But when it came to the Middle East, we started out asking permission and ended up not. Right, when we took out Soleimani, the head of the IRGC in Iraq, we didn't ask the Iraqi government for permission. Right, so that's a slippery slope we just found ourselves on, and we started it in Venezuela. So we have complete access to everything in Venezuela. But does that also mean that we're now responsible for the outcome? It's the Colin Powell rule. You break it, the Pottery Barn rule, right? You break it, you buy it. And are we in the same situation with Venezuela?
That has to be an ongoing discussion, because it sounds unresolved. I mean, you and I were joking earlier that things fall out of the media cycle very fast, but this is real life. Something has to get resolved there. Are you aware of any talks or negotiations ongoing to figure out what this format will actually be?
Yeah, I don't disagree with the initial thesis of the three-phase plan. You had stability, economic recovery, and democratic transition. The problem that the earthquakes brought is that we, according to Mike Kozak and others who were briefing Congress, we were past the stability stage. We're focused on economic recovery. So there's one problem, which is economic recovery cannot happen without democratic transition. These are the same people that expropriated and stole from American companies tens of billions of dollars of assets. So ConocoPhillips is owed like 11 billion, Exxon 2 billion. So if you're a publicly traded company with a board of directors and shareholders, how do you make an investment in a country that's already ripped you off when you have no sanctity of contract, no rule of law, no belief in the system? So what you're seeing and is private equity sniffing around at opportunities. It's kind of a wild west gold rush down there, as of people positioning themselves, but you don't see real money, real investment coming into the country yet. But because they're waiting for the democratic transition. But now with the earthquakes, we've actually moved backwards into stability operations again. I mean, this was a devastating earthquake, and I can't get over the fact that it's not more in the news here in the States. I think the final death figures according it could be as close. It could be all the way up to 50,000 people. 250 buildings along the coast outside of Caracas collapsed. Now, those were buildings, a lot of which were built by Maduro and/or by Chavez to try to quickly slap things up. They were told not to build in the zone. They built in these zones. I mean, it's I don't want to assign blame for this. I guess I just did, but at the end of the day, if the state doesn't function effectively, you end up with even more of a compounded tragedy. And because they were being ineffective for a period of time, this tragedy is just worse. That has a huge impact across society. So we're back in stability. So some of the companies that were looking at the economic recovery piece, they're on hold. Even those that were going to do it, they're on hold right now until we deal with this tragic set of events.
I saw one of the videos that it kind of hit home when the earthquake was some CCTV showing people running outside, and across the street there was a shake and the building just went. The entire 6-7 floor building, and it was like, oh my God, you have no time. The entire building went from standing normal to rubble in the blink of an eye. Like
in the blink of an eye. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's just so tragic. A guy I used to work with at the embassy there, Frank, one of my bodyguards, he lost his son in a building collapse, and he himself was severely wounded, and by the grace of God, his wife and his other child happened to be out at that time. So there are going to be tens of thousands of stories like that one that come out of this tragedy. Um, and it really, I'm not trying to politicize the tragedy, but at the same time, this is going to give an excuse to the regime to not go to elections. Well, we can't go to elections because we have to deal with this tragedy. So we had a nascent beginning of stage 3, this democratic transition, just started like 2 or 3 days before the earthquakes, where Denora Figuera, who's the head of the National Assembly of 2015, this is going to get kind of wonky, but that's the National Assembly we recognize, okay? So that was where Juan Guaido was. We recognized him as president. When he left, she took his place. So she began negotiations with Jorge Rodriguez, Delcy Rodriguez, the leader of Venezuela right now, her brother, who's the president of the current National Assembly, which we don't recognize. Yes, it's weird, right? The earth is not flat, but this is the world in which we live. But what Denora had, and I'm glad that they started this, but this was really a negotiation between the United States and Venezuela. Denora has what I call institutional legitimacy from the institution, but Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, she has the population behind her. She has legitimacy built on the people. She is by far the most popular politician in the country, and she's been blocked by the Trump administration from going back to Venezuela.
So what about the people? It feels like that's been a dynamic that we've completely glossed over here. We got Maduro, great. The upper echelons have kind of moved around. What about the people on the ground, the Venezuelan citizens that, where do they stand in this?
Well, everybody's happy Maduro's gone. I think even quietly, Delcy Rodriguez herself is happy he's gone, right? I mean, I know Delcy and I know Jorge, and I know that they thought very little of Maduro intellectually. They're much smarter than he is. And they were looking for, this was a great excuse for them to get to run the country, to be honest with you. But the people of Venezuela are tired of the same failed policies that they lived through under Maduro and before him under Chavez. They hollowed out this country and ransacked it. It's a group of brigands operating as a government. It's a criminal organization masquerading as a government. These are people who have basically stolen everything out of the country. So nothing works as it should. If you go to get an operation today in Venezuela, the doctor will say, okay, we can do it, but if you could bring the gauze and the sutures seriously, that's how
Bring
it
your
operates.
own equipment. Wow. Yeah.
Bring your own stuff and we'll do the surgery for you. I mean, can you imagine kind of a la carte in that anywhere in the world? So the people are done. They're done with Chavismo. And what my concern is that if we come across the United States as only concerned about oil and oil revenue and opportunities for our friends and their companies to make money, they'll sour on us. The earthquake response had better be a big one for the United States or they'll sour on us as well. So the people would like to see change. They voted in July of 24 overwhelmingly for a guy named Edmundo Gonzalez, who ran in the place of Maria Corina Machado, who's barred from running. Edmundo was known by 6 people, and he has 7 members of his family. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody knew who this guy was. And he still won overwhelmingly a rigged election in July of 24. But we forget about that. And we're doing business with Delcy and company. They need to get to a democratic transition in that country, or really and truly, we're not going to be successful there. And I'm concerned about our long-term image in the region and globally if this isn't successful.
What's the leverage that we have right now? Because you're using the term democratic transition, and great if we could check that box or push that button, but it seems like we're kind of just fingers crossed that they're going to go that direction.
I mean, look, we have all the leverage in the world. We took over their military airstrip downtown Caracas for this earthquake response. We fixed their main airfield. We have the Fort Lauderdale docked. We have aircraft everywhere with 900 soldiers, airmen, Marines. I don't know if Space Force made it or not, but we got everybody else down there. And so we have leverage. We have the leverage of gunboat diplomacy. We had the leverage of you don't know if we're going to send another drone or do another attack. So people like Diosdado Cabello, the Minister of Interior, who's a really bad guy, has a $25 million reward for justice on his head. So at any given moment, we could go snatch him up. That's
Still,
our
we
leverage.
didn't drop any of those.
No.
Interesting.
And we
Okay.
have members, and we have cabinet members of the United States going down there taking photographs with the guy. I mean, I recall during the Gulf War, pictures surfaced of people who had been shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. So this stuff doesn't age well, right? I don't think our policy blowing up drug boats will age well either. We could talk about that separately. But because I did run counter narcotics for Colombia and for the Western Hemisphere, I kind of understand this stuff. But look, our leverage is our ability to act. And what Delcy and company are trying to do is wait out the clock. They wait out the clock, so they're waiting. This is their game plan, always has been. Hopefully for them, the Democrats win the elections in November, which will somehow constrain President Trump, and or kick the can down the road far enough to where President Trump is no longer president. They could deal with somebody else. I mean, their goal is not to leave power, right? Their goal is to always maintain power. They can't imagine a world in which they're not in charge. But we have leverage, but we haven't asked enough, to be honest with you. I'll give you an example. We did, when negotiations were happening under the Biden administration, we created a chart. What are the things that are hard, medium, and easy to ask the regime to do, politically speaking? What are the things that are high, medium, and low impact for democracy? So I'll give you the example I like to use. The regime blocks they censor any incoming information. CNN in Espanol, you can't get it. X, Twitter, you can't get it unless you have a VPN. Lots of news sites and websites, things that you desperately need right now during a terrible event like the earthquake, right? Access to information, all blocked. It would be relatively easy for the regime to do this, and it would have a moderately good impact to democracy. Yet we haven't asked them to do that. They still have 400 political prisoners. Hopefully we got our hands on their MANPADS, their shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles. They have about 5,000 of those. Those kept me up at night when I ran counter narcotics in Colombia. Hopefully we have those underhand. Hopefully we have the keys to the Sequoias and other things, but we haven't asked enough on the democracy front from my perspective. And we should be. We have leverage. Every day our leverage is a little bit less. Walking away from January 3rd. We should be making this ask now.
Well, you've talked a couple times about the stability being phase one. And I remember the lead up to this, where there was a lot, I shouldn't say war, the lead up to this operation or regime change night. There was a lot of talk about a couple things that were kind of being framed as the rationale as to why Venezuela is an adversary, or the Maduro regime. Drug cartels and connections to IRGC or Iran. Same thing. Those I don't hear any more about. Has anything changed with either of those?
Well, I think, they certainly, I think that I got to get a little weedy here, but let me try. Yes and no. So the no part is there's still Chinese petroleum engineers wandering around the country. There's still a handful of kind of Russian military equipment still there. Iranians are probably mostly gone. Most of the Cubans are gone. What the Iranians provided them with were missile boats that they use in the Persian Gulf and armed drones. And again, I haven't heard about it. Hopefully, we have the keys to all these things, right? That we got it all under lock and key, and we know where it all is, or we destroyed it, or what have you. So there has been a change in how our geostrategic competitors have been able to utilize Venezuela as a platform for the region. So that I'd say yes. But when it comes to the drug trafficking and the cartel of the Suns, which we no longer talk about, well, Diosdado Cabello is one of the leaders of this cartel of the Suns. And Venezuela was only ever responsible for like 10%, maybe up to 15% of drug flow to the United States or to Europe out of Venezuela. No fentanyl. That all comes from Mexico, from Chinese precursors. The vast majority of the drugs still come from Colombia. what I can tell you is drug trafficking organizations can change their modalities to send cocaine north. So you blow up a bunch of drug boats, they just put it in shipping containers, or they put it on mules, or they fly it up in airplanes, or they do what, there's 1,000 different ways to do this. I don't know what the street price of cocaine is in the United States, but my understanding is from the White House Drug Czar's office it hasn't changed. In fact, I believe recent news had it going down. If the price of something is going down, that must mean the supply of it has gone up. So I don't think that augurs well for the policy itself. But yeah, we're not talking about the pretexts that we had for the operation on January 3rd anymore. We're kind of focused on other things.
What about the regional impact? I know part of the conversation here was if anyone around the world sees us go in and grab a dictator out of his bed, they're going to answer the phone. They're going to do what we say, or they're going to be a little more receptive to American ideas. Are you seeing that at all with Delcy Rodriguez or maybe anyone else in the region?
Well, it's interesting. I was speaking to somebody just the other day about this. If things go poorly, then the international community says it's a violation of international law. When things go well, people might mumble into their napkins, but they don't really say anything out loud. And so far, things have gone relatively well. I mean, first, Maduro was not recognized by over 60 countries that recognize Guaido as a president. So there's a legal hair you can split here. For the region, there are a couple of different things I think about. Right now, we've had a bunch of elections in the region that have turned right towards the right. Almost all of the elections have turned towards the right, except Uruguay. Of course, Brazil has an election coming up, which I imagine Lula will win, and Claudia Sheinbaum over in Mexico. But you've got countries that now want to work with the United States more. You have administrations that want to work with our administration currently more. But elections have consequences, and these things have a tendency to flip back and forth. And what I'm concerned about is kind of the unilateral approach long term is not a winning strategy for success. I mean, we're always best, and it has been since the end of World War II, when we work across organizations and entities and with multilateral partners and other nations. I mean, think about transnational criminal organizations. Think of the name, transnational, which means that they go across nation states. They don't pay attention to borders. So to the extent that we're working with others, we could be more effective. And there are plenty of things that are happening in the world that one country can't deal with. So my biggest concern is that while we may look like we're having some success right now, we're planting the seeds for some long-term failure by not continuing working with our allies and partners in this hemisphere and more broadly.
So in wrapping up here, Ambassador, this has been incredible, but just getting your thoughts on what are you watching for? What are the news items popping up that you're keeping an eye out to see, like, which direction all of this is headed?
Well, when it comes to Venezuela, the first thing is whether or not Maria Corina Machado goes back. And I've said what I'm going to say now, I've said before, but it bears repeating. In 2 days, we're going to be celebrating, the Declaration of Independence and July 4th, 1776. The people that put their name on that piece of paper were signing their own death warrant. And I think that whatever happens in Venezuela is going to have to be something new. You're not going back to something old. And I believe Maria Corina Machado, having the support of the population that she has, her return is that moment. And she's got to be willing to put herself out there, just like John Hancock and the rest of them did when they signed this thing. Just say, no more. This is who I am. This is what I believe in. And from those seeds of legitimacy, you will build a much better democracy in Venezuela. So I'm paying attention to what she's doing, where she is, how she's maneuvering. I'll look to see whether or not this other negotiation through Denora Figuera I mentioned earlier gets back on track. And then finally, and again, a little wonky maybe, this is a country, if we're gonna be investing in Venezuela, because it's the world's largest proven reserves of oil, it has all the critical minerals for the 21st century economy, but it also has 240 billion in debt. That debt started at 170 billion. And right before the earthquake, they came out saying, well, we think it's 240. And to be honest with you, I think Granddaddy's cigar box has some more receipts in it. And we're going to be closer to 300 billion. And then you start asking yourself the question, is this a good bet? is this country so in debt that they can't pay it back? They have resources. They've stolen from lots of international companies. The same people are in charge today. So I'm kind of looking at the debt question really closely. Like, how is this going to be resolved? Because without that, and without that starting that move towards democracy that's called for in this phase 3, without those things, you're not going to have the economic recovery that's needed. And this massive humanitarian crisis that's led to 8.5 million people fleeing the country, going across the region, it's just going to continue.
I was going to try to end on an optimistic note. I don't know that was it. But hopefully the door is there, and hopefully there's enough being shaken loose that there's something promising in the future for the Venezuelan people.
I think so. I think we can look. I think we should be optimistic. I think we should focus on opportunity. I think we should be asking more and utilizing our leverage today. The hard things to ask don't get easier with time. They just get harder with time. So I encourage the administration to ask the hard things now, and let's get on the road to democratic recovery. The people of Venezuela are waiting on it, and I think that we should follow their lead and go for it.
Like it. Hope to see you soon. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it, sir.
Real pleasure, Preston. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so thank you so much to Ambassador Story for taking the time to walk through all that today. It's a weird situation, isn't it? I mean, we talked about it a couple times in the interview, but the fact that this was such a major operation, that it's right here in the hemisphere, and we spent so much time kind of building up to what is going to happen with Maduro and Venezuela, and then as soon as he got grabbed, it was like 48, 72 hours of coverage, and then we just shifted on to the next thing. And it is very clearly not resolved in Venezuela, right? Like, Maduro out, good, but there is still a lot of work to be done, not just within the Venezuelan government, but with their relationship with the United States as well. So incredibly grateful to the ambassador for taking the time to kind of talk us through how things sit today. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.